Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We are very excited to sit down and share an interview we did yesterday with the CEO of Cybin, Doug Drysdale. As you guys know, he was supposed to be on earlier this week. Unfortunately, was not feeling so well, so we had a little schedule move around. We were able to find the time to sit down with him and talk a little bit about psychedelics, their recent results that they put out, and kind of what's coming up next. So I will put that on in a brief moment. But before we get started, I just wanted to kind of recover a little bit about what's coming up for the rest of this week. We are jumping back into cannabis tomorrow, and we're sitting down with Trent Wolevec from Juicy. We're going to sit down and talk a little bit about kind of the general cannabis landscape, but also focusing in a little bit on Virginia and Pennsylvania, as well as sort of getting that overall picture. I think he's a true expert in terms of the nuances there. So it'll be great to kind of dig into a state a little bit. I know a lot of the time we're talking about states, but it's sort of broad strokes in terms of, adult use, what the program is in general, and not kind of getting into the nitty gritty. So I feel like every so often it's great to do that. So stay tuned there. Of course, if you have any questions, you're always welcome. Also, hey, Stevie, how are you doing? Glad to see you here. Yes, we are through the middle of the week, so we're coming through. And then on Friday, we're going to have Noah Hammond back on. I think we kind of had a Friday type nooner a little bit earlier this week. We moved stuff around. So I think with this one, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the investing side of things. If you guys have any questions with either Trent or Noah or me, always feel free to ask them as we go and kind of go through stuff. We definitely want to try to be a resource to you, answer questions, education, any of that. We are here. Of course, if you want to check out any of our guests that are coming up, you can always look at the event center on the Advisor Shares page. I think there are some other fun ones coming up next week. I think we have Ron Piccinini on, so we'll be talking a little bit about risk management to start. Then, of course, we'll have Dan back on Tuesday. Wednesday, I think we have, I want to say Eddie Elfenbein on. So we'll be talking maybe Taylor Swift a little bit. I know she's been in the news and he's not an expert in her, but every time we sit down and talk, we ended up talking about Taylor Swift. So we'll cover a lot of different market stuff, what's going on in their portfolio, but also probably some Taylor Swift as well. And then what do we have Thursday? I gotta double check. Thursday we have gotta go to the thing myself. Let's see. Let me do a quick little check over. Go to the event center myself. See real quick who we have loading it up. And yeah, so it's just at the top, by the way, if anyone's going to the page and wants to check it out themselves. Sorry. So on Wednesday, we have Mary Met on. I'm sorry about that. And then on Thursday, we have Eddie Elfenbein on. So look forward to that. Lots coming up. But with that, I think I'm going to pop on this interview from yesterday and leave it there. So thanks so much, guys, for joining. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we will see you later this week, too. Thanks again. Everyone, and welcome back. We are very excited to sit down and spend a little bit of time to talk with Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin. This one is going to be a recorded version, so we are not live, unfortunately, not taking questions this time, but very excited to sit down and kind of talk about all the exciting work and information that's come out of Cybin lately, especially with your event that you had in New York. So thanks for joining us, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mackenzie. Thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Of course. How was your trip to New York in general? Did you get a hot dog? Did you do the whole New Yorker vibe thing, or was it pretty much all dedicated to the R&D event?
It was pretty much all work, but I lived in the city for a long time, so I think I'm sort of beyond doing the touristy things, done all that at some point.
That is totally fair. Love it. All right, well then, I feel like for anybody who hasn't super been following it, I'm guessing most people have, can you kind of just give us a quick high level of the story from the R&D day?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously very exciting results from our phase 2 study in depression with our psilocybin analog CYB3. We read out top line results with that asset and just quite remarkable. What we saw at 6 weeks was 8 out of 10 patients in remission after just 2 doses, which it's hard to overstate how significant that is. It's really unlike anything that has been seen before. And what's remarkable too is that we see effects in the first day after dosing and lasting out so far at 6 weeks, and we'll be following up for longer and have results next year. The other thing I think that was really remarkable was the consistency of the results. So with a single dose of 12 milligrams of CYB3, we saw a 14-point improvement in depression score compared to placebo. With a single dose of 16 milligrams, we saw a 13-point reduction, so pretty consistent. And then for those patients that had placebo in the beginning, the first dose, and then received an active dose, also saw a 14-point reduction in depression score. So 3 different groups, single doses. It looks like a single dose of CYB3 delivers a 14-point reduction in depression scores, which is quite remarkable when you consider that SSRIs on average deliver about a 2-point improvement. So we're really seeing such a paradigm shift in effects. And at the end of the day, the important thing is we had 8 out of 10 patients in remission after just a couple of doses.
Yeah, fantastic to hear for both Cybin and, again, the patients in general. I know last time we talked, we kind of had talked about the interim data, and now we have the full data. And then can you just remind us again, next steps in terms of CYB3, in terms of its process going through sort of testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was top-line data. So we will have a full, deeper data analysis coming in Q1, including follow-up with patients up to 3 months. So we'll see how long these effects can last. And obviously our goal is to try to sustain these benefits for as long as possible. We also expect to have a end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA in the first quarter as well. And the goal of that meeting will be to agree on the phase 3 study design. And that should put us in a good position to start recruiting patients in that phase 3 study by the end of first quarter next year.
That's fantastic. What does that recruiting process look like for patients? Is it just finding people who are qualified? How does that work in general?
So it'll be multiple sites, maybe 10 to 15 sites in the US. We will add a number of sites in Europe as well. It's quite a lengthy and involved screening process. We have a triple screening process. It's important to get the right patients into the study for safety purposes. And also you want patients that are genuinely meet the criteria for depression. So we go through quite a lengthy screening process, but we've had no trouble with recruiting so far. Unfortunately, there's a very large population of patients that are depressed and those that are taking SSRIs but are not well controlled, which is the population that we'll be recruiting.
That's fantastic. So something that you guys were talking about during that R&D or the day on Friday, I feel like a lot of the conversation was around how impactful these are, which we are seeing in terms of the data, like you're mentioning, but also how applicable they are to kind of a wide variety of different afflictions, whether that's depression, anxiety, PTSD, a whole range of things. Was just curious in terms of how compounds might work if they're scheduled for one thing, but they're able to kind of apply to others as well. Would you ever be able to kind of rerun CYB3 for depression, major depressive disorder, but also something else, or do they all pretty much fill into those exact, treatment ailment kind of components?
Yeah, so obviously right now what we're doing is trying to find the fastest path to approval, so that we can bring these treatments to patients as fast as possible. But you're right, there's plenty of evidence now from academic studies that psychedelics may work in areas outside of depression, such as anxiety disorders, eating disorders, postpartum depression, alcohol use disorder, tobacco use, substance use. So a really large population and really broad uses. I mean, just thinking about depression and anxiety, there are about 40 million people in the US taking an SSRI. So that gives you an idea of just the size of the potential opportunity. A small percentage of that market could be $100 billion. I mean, it's really quite an enormous opportunity, and an area where there's been very little innovation really for the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, unfortunate that I think it's such a wide population. Again, great that you're able to have that impact on such a large population, for sure. So that's sort of the other side of it. I would love to know, is there any sort of crowding in certain conditions versus others from like a perspective of psychedelic medicine? Like a lot of people are trying to treat depression versus eating disorders. Are there any areas that you're looking to expand into down the line? What's sort of your take there in terms of what things are trying to be treated?
Yeah, so our first target audience is patients suffering from depression or major depressive disorder. That's the focus of CYB3. CYB4, which is our DMT asset, is targeting anxiety disorders, specifically generalized anxiety disorder. Again, about 40 million people in the US suffering from anxiety disorders. It's actually the most prevalent form of mental illness. After that, we've stated that we're interested in alcohol use disorder. And then beyond that, of course, these other conditions, as time and resources allow, I think we would love to pursue eating disorders and other substance use disorders as well at some point down the line.
That's fantastic. Again, if it has the same impact that we've seen so far with CYB3, that would be fantastic. I'd love to talk a little bit kind of from the investment perspective a little bit. I think like we've seen a lot of great data, a lot of great impact so far, and it seems like there's a lot of progress being made. But would love to talk about the investment side of things, because I know in the short term, things don't always move kind of in line with maybe what you're seeing from a fundamental perspective. So I'd love to hear from sort of an investing perspective, how things are going, what your take is sort of generally there.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of years for biotech overall, hasn't it? And there's not a lot of correlation in the short term, it seems, between positive news and share price movements. I will say that our stock is up about 50% year to date. So it may be that some of the news was already baked in, and that there was an expectation that the results would be positive. That said, I think this is drug development takes a long time. This is a long-term project that we're working on, and as we're starting to see now, a improvement in the XBI, we're starting to see signs that interest rates may come down going forward, and there's a direct inverse correlation between the XBI and interest rates. So as interest rates come down, we'd expect biotech stocks in general to do well, and particularly those with great data, which clearly we have here. So this is just top line results. We'll continue to communicate the benefits. We had a team this week at ACNP in Tampa, a very exclusive event of neuroscientists, neuropharmacologists presenting 4 posters, and we'll continue to use channels like that to get these results out to the scientific community.
That's fantastic. You took my next 2 questions, which were, what is the impact of rates? And it seems like positive. I know there are expectations that we do get cuts next year. Whether or not we see that, it seems like inflation relatively has been tamped down. So we probably will get eventually some cuts, which would benefit sort of, biotech like you're mentioning. And then the latter question was sort of around what's important for investors to know. I think you guys do a great job communicating with your investors and sort of with, the public at large in terms of education and other things. But is there anything in particular that you'd want kind of investors to know as we move into 2024?
Yeah, so I think the 3-month results that are coming in first quarter would be important, because obviously nobody wants to be taking psychedelic treatments every few weeks. We want to make sure that these benefits will last for a long time, which is why we gave 2 doses in the study, and we saw a dramatic improvement in response and remission rates from the second dose, which was always our theory, that for some people it just takes a second dose because they may resist the first one. But we're also hopeful that our second dose not only improves remission, but sustains it for a long time. So that'll be interesting data to see. I also think that the end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA is really important. I mean, I think certainly biotech investors, strategic partners are looking for that sign-off from FDA, that validation that the phase 3 design is viable and valid. The other thing I'd say for investors is that we don't just have one program. We also have a deuterated DMT program, and expect in the next few weeks we'll have data from 2 phase 1 studies of CYB4 and SPL028, looking at dosing, PK/PD data, but also interestingly, first results from intramuscular injection. So this will be the first time that we've removed the need for an IV infusion pump, which is obviously challenging from a dosing point of view, to a small volume injectable, which would be much more convenient for patients and for providers. So that's some exciting data that's also going to be coming just in the next few weeks.
That's fantastic. And then you mentioned that coming data. How can people kind of stay on top of where that's coming out of? Is that on the website? Is that more kind of Twitter or X? How should people be kind of keeping track of that?
Definitely follow us on socials, Twitter, X, and LinkedIn, but also we're always posting new information on our website at cybin.com.
That is fantastic. All right. Well, then again, I really appreciate you sitting down with us, Doug. I think it's fantastic. Kind of get a check in on what's been going on. It seems like, again, a lot of positive news, a lot of positive data coming out, which is fantastic to see. And I think we're very excited to stay tuned for the data coming out soon. So thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Look forward to sharing it with you. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.